All right, so today we're diving deep into Nairobi, Kenya. But we're not talking about like your typical travel guide stuff. We're going beyond the usual tourist spots and using the backstory of Nairobi document as our guide. And we're going to explore this city as like a living, breathing character.
Oh, yeah. That's one of the things that makes this document so fascinating, the way it presents Nairobi. This city is brimming with potential. But at the same time, it's almost like stifled by its own history, like it's holding its breath.
Yeah, that holding its breath metaphor really struck me too. It's like Nairobi is caught between all these like opposing forces, you know? You've got these gleaming skyscrapers reaching for the sky, and right next to them are the sprawling slums where life is just a constant struggle. I think it's that clash of tradition and modernity, the wealth and the poverty, that really defines Nairobi's character. What do you think?
I totally agree. The document doesn't shy away from those contrasts at all. We're introduced to this place called the Royal Zenith Club, a playground for Nairobi's elite. Champagne's flowing freely, but just a few miles away, you have the slums of Mathare and Kibera where people are fighting for basic necessities.
It's like two completely different worlds, existing side by side, and that contrast isn't just background noise, it's practically woven into the city's DNA. But here's where things get really interesting. At the Royal Zenith Club, a mysterious black envelope shows up. It's addressed to Baraka Braveheart, the heir to a powerful and notoriously corrupt dynasty. The message inside: the truth will cost you everything. It sounds like a thriller.
Oh, it definitely has that element of suspense. But that black envelope is more than just a plot device. It's like a symbol. It represents all the weight of Nairobi's past, all those hidden secrets and injustices that have been swept under the rug. And now this envelope is threatening to bring everything to light.
So it's almost like this envelope acts as a catalyst. It sets off a chain of events that forces not just Baraka, but the whole city to confront its demons, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, will facing the truth lead to liberation or destruction? That's the dilemma at the heart of this whole story. And it's a theme that resonates throughout history.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, think about things like the Watergate scandal or the Panama Papers. The pursuit of truth can be really risky, especially when you have powerful interests at stake.
Yeah, you're right about that. And in Nairobi's case, the source material suggests a long history of corruption that's deeply ingrained in the city. The Braveheart dynasty seems to embody that, profiting from a system that keeps most of its citizens struggling.
Right. So if the Bravehearts represent this dark underbelly of Nairobi's past, who or what represents the hope for a better future?
That's where the document shifts its focus to the people living in the slums. Despite the poverty, the lack of opportunities, the inadequate infrastructure, there's this strong sense of community and resilience that shines through.
I can picture those bustling markets you mentioned, the colorful matatis weaving through traffic, even the vibrant street art that brings life to the most rundown corners. It seems like despite the hardship, there's an undeniable spirit that keeps Nairobi going.
Yeah, it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving. There's a dynamism, a creativity that emerges from these communities. It's a spirit of entrepreneurship that finds a way to flourish even in the face of adversity.
It makes you wonder, if Nairobi's holding its breath, are these communities the ones providing the oxygen?
That's a really insightful way to look at it. They're the ones who keep the city alive, bring the color, the energy, the hope, and maybe it's through them that Nairobi will finally be able to exhale, to break free from its past, and finally breathe freely.
It's like they hold the key to unlocking the city's true potential. But how does that actually play out in the story? What role do these communities have in everything that happens after that black envelope arrives?
Well, the document suggests that the message of the black envelope doesn't just reach the elite. It starts to circulate through the slums, whispered in marketplaces, shared on crowded matatis.
So this truth, this potential for change, it filters down to the people who are most affected by the corruption and injustice. It's interesting to think about how information travels, how even a single message can spark a movement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what makes this story so compelling. It's not just about one character's journey or a family's secrets. It's about a whole city grappling with its identity, its past, its future.
And it seems like those living in the slums, the ones who are so often overlooked and marginalized, might actually hold the key to Nairobi's transformation.
That's the question that emerges as the story unfolds. Can the resilience and spirit of these communities overcome the deep-seated corruption and inequalities that have plagued Nairobi for so long?
It's like this classic David and Goliath battle, but with the fate of an entire city hanging in the balance. Now, I'm really curious to see how it all plays out.
We'll get ready, because things are about to get even more intense as we dive deeper into the backstory of Nairobi.
Okay, so we've got this city holding its breath, an elite club where secrets are being whispered, and this black envelope that feels like a ticking time bomb. Where does the story go from here?
Well, that black envelope really sets off a chain reaction. The document describes like this wave of unrest that starts to ripple through Nairobi. There are protests happening in the streets, whispers of rebellion in the slums, and this growing sense that the old order is starting to crumble.
It's like that message, the truth will cost you everything. It doesn't just impact Baraka and his family.
Yeah.
It becomes this rallying cry for the people who have been marginalized and silenced for so long, you know?
Right, exactly. And the document highlights how this unrest is fueled by these stark economic disparities in Nairobi. They have these massive infrastructure projects like the superhighway. It was supposed to modernize the city and attract foreign investment. But the reality is that these projects often benefit the wealthy elite while displacing those living in these informal settlements.
So it's like the city is being built on top of the very communities that are struggling to survive. That's got to create some tension, right?
Absolutely. And this tension is made even worse because Kenya has this history of land grabbing and forced evictions. It goes all the way back to the colonial era. So when you see these modern developments pushing further into the slums, it evokes this deep sense of injustice and resentment.
It's like the past is repeating itself, only with like a modern facade.
Yeah, that's a really good observation.
Yeah.
It speaks to how complex Nairobi's story really is. The way that colonial legacies continue to shape the present, even as the city is striving for progress.
So how do the Bravehearts, with all their wealth and influence, react to this growing unrest? Do they try to maintain control, or do they start to feel the pressure?
The document gives us a really interesting look into the Braveheart family. Baraka, the one who received the black envelope, is actually a more complex character than his ruthless father. He's torn between loyalty to his family and a growing awareness of the injustices that his family has been part of.
So there's some internal conflict there. Maybe he's not totally comfortable with the way his family has gained their wealth and power. It makes him a more relatable character, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. And this conflict within the Braveheart family mirrors the larger struggle that's happening across Nairobi. On one hand, you have those clinging to the old ways, trying to keep things the same. And on the other, you have those who are pushing for change, for a more equitable and just society.
So it's like the city itself is having an identity crisis, trying to figure out what it wants to be in the 21st century.
That's a great way to put it. As the story unfolds, we see these different factions all vying for power, each one trying to shape Nairobi's future in their own way. There's a political elite like the Bravehearts, who want to maintain their control. Then you have the activists and community organizers fighting for social justice and economic equality. And then there's this growing middle class who are caught in between, trying to navigate this rapidly changing environment.
It's like a three-way tug of war, each pulling in a different direction. So where does the story go from here? What happens when these forces collide?
Well, the document doesn't give us all the answers, but it hints at this dramatic confrontation that's coming. Remember that black envelope, the one that said the truth would cost everything? It seems like that truth is about to come out, and it could have devastating consequences.
It's like a powder keg ready to explode. And the question is, who will get caught in the blast? Will it be the elites who have benefited from the corruption, or will it be the innocent people who are already struggling?
Right, and that's what keeps us on the edge of our seats. What's so fascinating is that the document doesn't offer any easy answers. It's a messy, complicated story that reflects the reality of urban life in a developing country.
Yeah, it makes you think about how change rarely happens in a neat and tidy way. It's often chaotic and unpredictable with unintended consequences.
Absolutely. That's what makes this deep dive into Nairobi so compelling. It forces us to confront those complexities, grapple with the moral ambiguities, and to acknowledge that the pursuit of truth and justice is rarely straightforward.
It reminds us that even in a city that seems to be holding its breath, life goes on. People keep striving, keep hoping, keep fighting for a better future. But what does that future hold? What will it take for Nairobi to finally exhale and break free from its past? So we've talked about all this tension in Nairobi, all the secrets, the clash of old and new, but I keep coming back to that image of the city, like it's holding its breath. What does it take for a city, or really for any of us, to finally just exhale and breathe freely?
It's such a powerful metaphor, isn't it? And it's a question that the backstory of Nairobi really grapples with on like an individual level. For characters like Baraka, it's about them confronting their own role, their own complicity in the systems that cause injustice, you know?
Right.
It's about having the courage to speak truth to power, even when it's hard, even when there's a personal cost.
It's like they need to find their own breath, their own voice. to break free from what's expected of them, from the legacy that's been handed to them. But what about for the whole city? What would it take for Nairobi to exhale as a whole and embrace like a new chapter?
That's where things get really interesting. The document suggests that real change in Nairobi, it can't just come from the top down. It needs a groundswell, like a collective action, a shift in consciousness that touches every level of society.
So it's not about waiting for a hero or a perfect leader to come along. It's about the everyday people, the ones we've been talking about, the ones who are living and breathing the city's struggles day in and day out.
Exactly. It's about those communities finding their voice, demanding accountability from those in power. It's about seeing how everything's connected, the economic inequality, the social injustice, the environmental problems. It's all intertwined.
It's like, you know that saying, think globally, act locally, but on a citywide scale? Even small acts of resistance, small steps toward a more just and equitable society, they can contribute to a much larger wave of change.
Right. And it's about understanding that change takes time. It's a long process. It can be messy, frustrating. There will be setbacks, There'll be times when you have to compromise, moments of doubt. But the important thing is to keep moving forward, to keep breathing life into that vision of a better future.
As we've been talking, I've been thinking about how important storytelling is in all of this. I mean, the backstory of Nairobi is a fictional narrative, but it's clearly based on real issues and challenges that the city actually faces. Do you think stories like this have the power to inspire change?
I think that's a really great question. And it gets to the heart of why we do this deep dive. Stories have this power to take complex issues and make them more accessible. They can humanize statistics, create empathy and understanding where before there might have been just apathy.
It's like they open a window into other people's worlds, other people's experiences, and through that window we can start to see the connections between our own lives and the larger systems that are at play.
Exactly. And by engaging with these stories, by letting ourselves be moved by them, we can start to imagine different possibilities, different ways of living. We can see ourselves as agents of change instead of just watching from the sidelines.
So as we finish up this deep dive into the backstory of Nairobi, I'm left with a sense of hope, but also a sense of responsibility. It's obvious that the challenges facing Nairobi are complicated and run deep, but it's also clear that there are people working really hard to create a better future for their city.
And what's really exciting is that the story is still being written. The future of Nairobi isn't set in stone. It's being shaped right now by the choices that individuals and communities are making every day.
And that's a powerful message for all of us, no matter where we live or what challenges we're facing. We all have a part to play in shaping the narratives that define our world. We can be part of the problem, or we can choose to be part of the solution. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Nairobi. We hope it's made you curious, challenged what you thought you knew, and maybe even inspired you to think about the role you want to play in making a more just and equitable world.